Check the description for the following discount codes. Excuse me if I sound a little croaky today. As some of you know, I've been getting over everyone's favourite virus over the last couple of weeks, and today seems to be a croaky day. But I want to get this review of the Pico 4 out because I haven't been able to upload much recently, you know, being ill. And this is the first thing I've managed to get through, you know, over the last week, making a load of notes and doing a load of testing. So, first things first, I'll cut straight to the chase. For £379 in the UK, of course, this is a great standalone headset and I have no problem recommending it whatsoever. Now, if you want to hang around and find out the good points and the bad points, that's what we're going to get into now. We'll just give you a little close-up, first of all. One of the best things about this headset is, of course, we've got the battery in the back, which gives it a much more balanced sort of weight distribution. I mean, my thumb probably should be about there. So ever so slightly still to the front, but nothing, you know, like compared to, say, a Quest 1 or 2 or any other headset that's completely got all of its weight at the front. I do like the design. We've got a slimmer profile here at the front because of the pancake lenses and the fact that the battery is, of course, now in the back. So I like the way it looks. I like the balanced design with the battery in the rear. The battery isn't removable, neither is the strap. So you are kind of stuck with it as it is. But, you know, I guess that's one of the compromises you have to make for having the battery in the back. And also at this price point, because what you could do from a design point of view is easily have, you know, the strap still come off like it does, say, on the Quest 2 with just contacts here and here for the power to go through. It doesn't have to be fixed like this one is. But this is, you know, one of the things we have to remember with all reviews is the price of whatever it is we're reviewing. And this, for an all-in-one standalone VR headset that can also be used for PC VR, is cheap. It's actually now slightly cheaper than the Quest 2, and in some ways it's quite a bit better. So, you know, things like not being able to remove the strap, well, that is what it is. So yes, I like it. It's great. It's definitely worth getting. Now, design-wise, yeah, I like it. That's good. They've taken a lot of inspiration, and you'll see this as we go throughout the review, from the Quest 2 in the choice of colours, even in the design of the packaging. You know, there's very much reminiscent of the way the Quest 2 packaging was designed. Now, aside from the sort of well-balanced nature of it, the overall comfort is actually pretty poor. Not because of the weight, because it is light and it is well-balanced, but because of this facial interface and this concrete back piece here that almost doesn't, you know, squish compared to other, you know, cushioning on the back of your head from other headsets. I still can't get my words out well, can I? Bloody virus. It's probably second only to the Pimax headsets. This is probably my most uncomfortable headset that I've owned or used. But it is only because of the facial interface, which is 100% not designed for Western face shapes. And I'll put it on a bit later in the video, and you'll see that I can get my fingers down the side just like I could on the Pimax headsets, which means you get massive light leakage. And not only do you get massive light leakage, with these lovely pancake lenses, they act just like mirrors. So if you're in a well-lit room and your face is a similar shape to mine, you will actually be able to see detail of the room behind you reflected in these lenses as you look around. It's really quite strange. So, but you know, like all the other reviewers have said, hopefully VR cover will come along and provide a new face gasket, because it does just magnetize and clip in. So it should be really easy to solve. And this, of course, is a profile of, look at that profile of that headset with the facial interface off. That is super thin, which is great. Again, it's because the battery's at the back and because these pancake lenses are, of course, slimmer than your typical Fresnel lenses. So yeah, hopefully, you know, this issue will be will be solved by a VR cover. But I mean, even like this, you can see, look, my fingers, and I'm pushing this as hard as I can on my face, and I can get my fingers literally in and out the front. And that's where, you know, the light leakage comes in. But that's an easy one to solve with an aftermarket facial interface or facial gasket, whatever you could choose to call it. The sort of nose shroud works perfectly. I have no light leakage down there whatsoever. And again, talking about comfort, I have to crank this up really, really tight to try and minimize that light leakage at the sides. And that, of course, makes it uncomfortable too. So again, with the new aftermarket facial interface, hopefully I won't have to crank the strap up quite so tight either, because that makes it uncomfortable. But yeah, this rear cushion, and of course this can't be changed easily. I'm going to assume it's probably glued in position there. That is rock hard, so it doesn't mould to the back of your head very well. And just, it doesn't feel like it's on there secure. So at the moment, the headset can be a little bit wobbly on my head. Again, unless I crank this up really tight, but then that makes it horribly uncomfortable because it's squishing against your face really hard. So yeah, design and comfort. Design's lovely. Comfort right now, not great at all, at least not for my face shape. Now, my friend Justin Carter, who does my retro live gaming streams with me, that actually fitted his face perfectly. No light leakage around the sides, no light leakage around the nose. He was in there completely and was having a great time. So again, this will of course be face shape dependent. But for me, weight and balance, marvellous. Comfort, pretty poor at the moment. But I'm hoping VR cover will come to the rescue with that. Now, build quality wise, the build quality, again, we've got to remember £379. The build quality is good, but it's not excellent. It's very close to the build quality of, say, the Quest 2. And again, that's a very entry-level sort of price point device as well, although it was subsidised at launch, you know, to be able to do it at such a low price. This is close to the build quality of the Quest 2, but you can tell it's not quite there. The plastics do feel a little bit cheaper. The buttons on the controllers, triggers, grip, and overall build quality of controllers, again, also feels a little bit cheaper than, say, the Quest 2. In fact, the controllers, a little bit reminiscent of what I felt when I had the G2, the HP Rev G2, because the controllers on that were terrible controllers. And they just felt cheap, and there was like sharp edges where the battery cover goes. And we have a similar, but not as bad sort of feel with these controllers. I'll get onto the controllers in a bit as I work my way down my list of information here. And this review today is going to be a review of the headset as a VR headset, you know, both for standalone and PC VR. I'll do a separate video where I do lots of sim racing testing, and another video where I do some Microsoft Flight Simulator testing. Otherwise, this video would be like an hour long, and nobody really wants to see that. So next, we'll go on to the displays and the lenses, which of course are the pancake lenses rather than the Fresnel lenses. The image on this is super crisp. It is just beautiful. It makes the Quest 2 look noticeably blurry. The sweet spot, other reviewers have said that like the sweet spot is the entire lenses. It isn't the entire lenses. When you get to the edge of the lenses, it is very, very blurry. But the sweet spot is massive, the biggest by far I've seen in any headset, and the edge-to-edge clarity is the same. You can actually use your eyes to look around. So those pancake lenses are just excellent. And the screens themselves, 2160 by 2160, maximum refresh rate of 90 Hertz. They are individual screens, displays, of course, rather than one display like you might find in the Quest 2, for example. But I was, you know, when I was going back between the Quest 2 and this, the difference is night and day as far as clarity goes. There is a little bit of glare if you have like bright white text on a black background, but nothing like the old school God rays that you would get, you know, again with the Fresnel lenses. And just talking about the sort of maximum refresh rate of 90 Hertz, some people might say, oh, you know, Quest does 120 Hertz, Valve Index does 144. You know, having had a Quest 2 here since launch, I've never once used the 120 Hertz mode because as a primary PC VR player, most PC VR games, when you max out the in-game graphics to make it look as nice and as realistic as possible, they won't run at 120 Hertz, even with my 3080 that I've got at the moment. So being able to go to 120, 144, unless you're playing games that really don't have very good graphics, is a pointless feature. Now I know some of the Quest standalone titles, what's that table tennis game called? I can't remember now. But that runs 120 Hz. That's useful because that table tennis game is a game where speed and refresh rate is super important because table tennis can be very fast if you're good. You know, so that was utilised in the standalone point of view. But for me, mostly playing PC VR, never once did I go over the 90 Hertz sort of threshold in my Quest 2 because if I did, I'd have to turn my graphics down, which I'd rather have 90 Hertz and better visuals than 120 Hertz and it looking like a PlayStation 1 game, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't think the 90 Hertz is a drawback at all, and especially when you combine that with the slight bump in resolution this has over, say, the Quest 2, and the fact that the clarity and overall image quality is just excellent. Screen door effect, you don't notice it. Screen door effect's really a thing of the past now, unless you specifically choose to look and try and find some pixels in certain, you know, scenes and environments. It's really not a thing that you need to worry about. Not like the old days of the Rift CV1, for example, where you could quite clearly, you know, see the pixels and get quite obvious jagged edges for things. Now, one of the other things I found interesting, some other reviews that I've watched, is people saying that this is not as bright as, say, the Quest 2 or some other headsets, and then they use the phrase, even with the brightness turned all the way up. Now, if any of you know anything about displays, whether it's VR headset displays, whether it's, you know, monitors, televisions, whatever it might be, you never, ever, ever, in any circumstances, turn your brightness all the way up. Your brightness level in any display is essentially a black level setting. People often get this confused and think brighter, turn the brightness up, it will make the whites and the colours brighter. It's not how it works. Brightness controls your black levels. Your brightness should be turned down as much as you can without things going too dim, and then perhaps just go up a notch or maybe two. That way you will get the best possible blacks and the least washed out image possible for whatever display it is that you're using. Contrast control is what controls how white your whites are. Now, we don't have contrast or color adjustment in this or in the Quest either, as far as I remember. I haven't checked in a while. We only have brightness. So what you want to do is either turn the brightness all the way down and then come up until you feel it's as bright as you would like it to be, or what I do, turn the brightness all the way up and then bring it all the way, and not bring it all the way down, bring it down slowly until the blacks start to look black rather than grey, and balance that with the overall brightness of the image. And at that point, you will get nice, decent blacks, as much as an LCD panel can provide, without washing out, you know, the colours and the overall image quality. Under no circumstances, turn your brightness all the way up thinking, I want a brighter image. It will look horrible. It's just not something that should be done. So I find no issues, excuse my croaky voice again, with the brightness of this panel. Some people say the pancake lenses reduce the brightness. I have no issues with the brightness whatsoever. And in actual fact, I think the blacks, and so as a result, your contrast ratio is actually a little better in this than what it is in, say, the Quest 2, once you've set the brightness to the right level. I do, however, think the colours are perhaps, they're either a little bit oversaturated, again, there's no colour controls, or perhaps they're not quite calibrated properly. I don't know. Something does look a little off with the colours, but don't take my word for that because I am colourblind. But I'm only comparing what my eyes see, you know, from all the different VR headsets I've used, the Pimax ones, the 3 different
Oculus offerings, including the Quest, not really Oculus, but you know what I mean. The HP Reverb G2, this, and what else we use? Valve Index, and what have you. So, albeit I am colourblind, just comparing, you know, one to another, something with the colours doesn't look quite as it should with those. It's hard for me to tell you what it is though, if you know what I mean. But perhaps other people who have got them will have had a similar experience. But otherwise, you know, the crispness of the panels, the brightness, the vividness of the colours is fine. The brightness, the blacks, that's all okay. I have no issues with those whatsoever. I actually prefer the way it looks, you know, over the Quest 2 panels, which I think look noticeably more washed out. Now, audio is the next thing we'll talk about, and that, much like the Quest and the Rift S, comes out of the side of your strap here. The audio on this is absolutely fine for this implementation. In terms of audio, obviously it's terrible, just like the Rift S, just like the Quest 1 and 2. You know, compared to, say, a pair of proper headphones, or, you know, some actual full-size speakers, obviously it's awful. They're like the equivalent to laptop speakers or monitor speakers or even TV speakers. They're just not good. They can't do, their dynamic range is obviously poor because they're very small drivers, so they can't do bass particularly well. But bearing all that in mind and comparing it to other headsets, obviously, that have a similar implementation, the audio is fine. It's perfectly usable. And I would actually say there is a tiny bit more punch to the bass than what there is in the Rift S or the Quest 2. For example, it might be because I think this bit of the strap here is actually a little bit bigger, so it almost acts a little bit like a speaker cabinet to give you a little bit more bass. And I use the word bass really in inverted commas because there isn't any actual bass. You just can't do 40, 50 hertz, you know, well out of something like this. It's not how it works, but it's perfectly usable when you compare it to other headsets at the same price point and with the same implementation. The volume is fine. What you will have to make sure you do is when you're putting this on your head, if you have a strap, say, up at a high angle like that to cup the top of the back of your head, again, depending on your face shape, that then means the speakers are brought up higher and further away from your ears. So you'll notice if you put this lower or higher or wherever you end up, the volume will increase or decrease. And you know, when you get it in exactly the right spot, you're like, oh, it's really quite loud now. That may or may not be where you end up having it, depending on your face shape and head size and shape, but that's just something to notice. If you think, oh, the volume's a bit quiet even though it's all the way up, just perhaps have a look in a mirror, you know, and see, oh, is my headset, is it angled up a lot? You know, maybe I should try it a bit lower, perhaps just going under the back of that piece of your head there, and then you'll notice a huge volume increase. What else should we say about the audio? Right, so yeah, speaking of headphones, there is no headphone socket anywhere on this. There is, of course, USB-C. Now, USB-C, you can send audio over with using a couple of different adapters here. One of these has a DAC, one doesn't. I thought I'd try them both, and they both worked for me. They're just Ugreen branded ones off of Amazon. I'll stick a link in the description, you know, should anybody actually need them. You can get these with USB-C pass-through for charging as well, and that way you can have your headphones and you can keep it charged if you're someone that wants to put maybe a power pack in your pocket for extended play sessions, or if you're using it tethered to your PC, but I wouldn't really recommend doing that. It's just far better to do it wireless, unless, you know, perhaps you're sat in a sim rig and you want to keep it charged, and, you know, do it that way. We'll go more into that later when I talk about the PC VR side of things. But yeah, audio wise, if you want to plug your headphones in, you can. These are not expensive, £5 or £6, something like that. One of the things I do find annoying is the placement of the volume controls. They're on top of the strap here. And whenever I adjust the headset up and down, you know, during aggressive play or whatever, I need to move it around a little bit, I'm forever hitting the volume controls. But I used to do the same thing on the Quest 2 with them underneath here, because I would hold it like this. So on this one, I'm hitting them with my top finger. On the Quest, I'll be hitting them with my thumb. So VR headset manufacturers just need to put their volume control somewhere else, as far as I'm concerned, because I always seem to be twatting the volume up or down, whether they're on the strap or whether they're underneath. But, you know, maybe that's just a me thing, and maybe you guys don't do that. What else can we say about the audio? Oh, I suppose this kind of doesn't fall into an audio category as such, but the fan is audible if there is no other sound coming from the speakers. You hear it, whirring away like a little laptop fan is probably the best way to describe the fan that you hear in here. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention talking about the displays earlier is, of course, the IPD adjustment. It is motorized, which is a nice and unnecessary touch. A dial would have been just fine. But yes, the lenses do move in and out. They say it's stepless. It isn't stepless. It's in 0.5 mil increments, and you literally see the lenses go one step at a time. But this is probably just a little bit of the Chinese marketing coming into play here. But yes, the range is 68 to, did I write it down or did I not? I think it's 68 to 74, and I believe it can go as low as 58. No, I didn't write it down, apologies. I believe it can go as low as 58 mil, but it gives you a warning saying that the lenses may hit the bridge of your nose if you need to go that low. But hopefully, if your eyes are that close together, it's because maybe you've got a very small head. Maybe you're a child, in actual fact, and so your head is going to be smaller, which means your nose is going to be smaller, and hopefully it won't hit the lenses. For me, when I put it down to the minimum setting of 62, they do just touch my nose there. But yes, that's how the IPD adjustment works, and it's really nice to be able to just do that and then move themselves around. Totally over the top feature for the price point of this headset, but a welcome addition. Although saying that, my brain instantly just went, oh, but what if it goes wrong? You can imagine like the lenses just open themselves out to maximum IPD, and there's no way of you putting them back to where you need them to be because something's gone wrong inside the headset. I think probably just having a mechanical dial might have been an easier thing to do, and a little bit of cost saving as well, because the motors obviously cost money, as does the mechanism. But that's just the midlife man in me, middle-aged man in me saying, these newfangled motorized lenses, what if they go wrong? A bit like automatic handbrakes on cars, although they do go wrong. I work on cars for a living, as some of you will know. They do go wrong, and I get calls from people saying, Carl, can you come out to me? My handbrake is stuck on my car. I'm parked outside the local school, and I can't turn it off. So, there is an argument for keeping some things simple, and I think handbrakes is definitely one of those. And perhaps in VR headsets, motorized lenses, depending on how good a quality it is inside, might be another one that might have been best left for a dial. We do get that slight feeling of, like I say, ever so slightly cheap-ish build quality compared to, say, the Quest. Not by much, though. The strap adjustment, this feels nice and solid. I've had some really cheap Amazon ones sent over to me for review that I haven't even reviewed because they're they're not interesting and they're just cheap and cheerful. People send them anyway. And some of these mechanisms, you just think they're going to break instantly. This doesn't feel like that. This feels good and solid. But like I said, the build quality isn't quite like it would be with the Quest, and we'll get to that as well when we talk about these controllers. I love these controllers. I think the idea of the sort of overhand tracking arch is great because now you can get them completely together. Your thumbs can touch, whereas before your big tracking rings would stop you about here. So you can get them closely together, and it does make dual wielding things that bit easier and less likely to smack them on one another. So that is nice. So the plastics and the buttons do feel, let's give you a little close up of these, they do feel noticeably cheaper quality than, say, the Quest 2, for example. They don't feel poor, as in like, these are nasty, but you can tell they're not quite the same quality as some of the other controllers. And this extends around the entire thing because the fit and finish, so the way these are in like two halves, there's a seam that runs down it. And when I was using these, I could feel, you might hear it creaking. In fact, oh yeah. So I want to say panel gaps, if I was talking about a car, don't quite line up properly. All I'm doing here is just applying a little bit of pressure here. Not much pressure, just squeezing it, but where this seam is, you can actually see, if you just move it around a little bit, it creates a gap and opens up at the bottom. And when you're using these, you feel it moving around, and you can feel the seams opening and closing as you're gripping and letting go, gripping and letting go. And the same applies to the battery compartment. I think this is a really cool little design where you just pull the button, it slides up, and your two AA batteries come out. But again, where the sort of gap is here, as you're squeezing the controller in use, not only is it squeaking, you can feel that gap opening and closing. Not so much that it would pinch your skin, but you're like, oh, it's all kind of a bit loose and a bit moving around. My left one is noticeably worse than my right one. The right one, does that creak and crack? Only a little bit. Yeah, not as bad as that one. So this one doesn't feel quite as bad, but this one really feels, and that gives it a feeling of cheapness, because the Oculus controllers, or Meta, whatever the hell you want to call them, controllers, are rock solid. Where the two halves join together, they're not squeaking and cracking it and moving around. And when you're using them, you know, Beat Saber or boxing or, you know, shooting, whatever it might be, because you don't feel it. My fingertips rest on the seam there, and your fingertips are very sensitive. So you notice those sort of two halves moving around from one another. Again, there's just that slight feeling of cheapness compared to other headsets and other controllers that we've used. But ignoring that, they function just fine. I've had no trouble with the tracking. The buttons are capacitive. Should you want to do various gestures in game, then you can. I actually think I slightly prefer the thumbsticks. They're a bit more grippy than, say, the ones on the Quest, so they're nice, and everything works just as it should. You have got screenshot button on this one for taking individual screenshots, and you can press and hold to record video. In fact, throughout this review, there'll be some footage up well, in fact, I'll probably put it up now. Some footage up of the user interface. It's literally a carbon copy of the Quest software and user interface. And that's no bad thing, because that works just fine. But they've literally just done exactly the same thing. There are some grammatical errors throughout some of the menus. You know, again, Chinese to English translation, not bang on 100%. And it isn't quite as smooth. I've had it crash once, and I've had to reset the headset. I've never had that happen with a Quest, for example. But essentially, you know, the user experience through the menus and everything is just fine. Nothing particularly exciting. It works well enough, and it looks nice. So where are we up to now? Yeah, that's the controllers. Like I say, the triggers, the grip buttons, they all feel perfectly fine to use. You can just tell they're not quite the same quality of materials, and potentially even, you know, the springs or the analog buttons that will consist of springs and probably potentiometers. I mean, they could be hall sensors, I don't actually know. You may ponder, are they going to last as long as perhaps other manufacturers? But we won't really know, you know, until we've had this headset out, you know, for maybe 6 months or a year, and people have put some real serious hours into using it. But I'm not hesitant. They don't feel bad and proper cheap and nasty like some other stuff that I've reviewed. It's just to point out, you know, as a reviewer, we have got creaky plastics and cracky plastics that move around as you grip it, and, you know, the buttons don't quite feel as good as some other headsets. But I do love the controllers. I love the, you know, I mean, it's a tried and tested shape. The actual controller, it fits nicely in my hand. Interestingly, I thought 2 AA batteries, it's going to make it feel heavy. Because it's been a while since I've used my G2. Well, I haven't got my G2 anymore. I sold it, but that used 2 batteries in the controllers, and I remember them feeling heavier. But these don't feel in any way too heavy. It's absolutely fine. No issues whatsoever with two batteries. You know, how the Quest runs with just one for as many hours as it does is still super impressive. The haptics in these controllers actually is nice. They're definitely a step up from, say, the Quest 2 haptics. So that's another positive for these controllers. Obviously, you've got your little wrist straps as well, which I recommend using so you don't end up launching your controllers at your wall, your TV, your computer screen, whatever you might be, or your friends and family in the room, depending what you're facing. during play. Again, there'll be footage of me playing a couple of different games come up throughout this video as and when I feel it's relevant, and I'm not physically showing you stuff here. But I've enjoyed this headset. You know, I really like it, and have, for the money, don't really have any complaints. So, oh yeah, just briefly going, another thing from other reviews that I've said, people saying, oh, there's a good weight to these controllers, really feels quality. The feeling of weight is, of course, because there's two AA batteries in. If you take the batteries out, then these feel super, super light. So you can't kind of take the weight of the controller, how it feels in your hand, as a sign of quality. Obviously, especially when there's double the batteries in there that there is compared to the Quest 2, for example. Oh, one other thing that caught me out with these, with the Quest, you can press any button, the controllers come to life. On these, you actually have to press the, well, it's just like a round blue and round orange button to bring them back to life. Because when I first got them, I'm like, why are my controllers, they don't seem to be working, what's going on? And I just had to press that button. And again, talking about the initial setup, it's much the same as the Quest. You know, you use your pass-through. In this case, it's a colour pass-through, and you draw your Guardian just like you would do. Normally, the colour pass-through is nice that it's colour, but it's still not 3D, and it's still waving. It still makes you feel sick if you're prone to motion sickness, just like the pass-through on the Quest and the Rift S, for example. You know, would have been nice to have two cameras for proper three-dimensional depth perception, because then you could use it for augmented reality. Pardon me. You can't do that with a single camera. You know, it's all wavy and distorted, and just, no, you wouldn't use it for that. You know, there's a reason we have two eyes. So yes, that's many different things I've just gone off on tangents on. Battery life, around 2.5 hours. Does have a bigger battery than the Quest, and they claim 3 hours. I've not got 3 hours out of it. That is going to vary depending what games you play, how bright your screen is, how loud the volume is, how much you move around even. So maybe you can squeeze 3 hours in a seated position, not using the controllers, with the volume low and screen brightness down. I don't know, but 2 to 2.5, probably a more realistic figure. Of course, we are pushing more pixels. The screen, two screens are being, you know, lit up in higher resolution. So that will factor in as well. And I believe they run the XR2 chipset slightly faster, perhaps, than the Quest. And of course, there's more RAM. All these things use a little bit more battery, so that's probably why it is. But I've never got to 3 hours, not even close. Now, let's talk about standalone headset use, how it plays, for example, before we talk about PC VR use. As a standalone headset, the experience is pretty much the same as the Quest 2's game library in the way that things look and play, because it's the same chipset, it's running Android, and developers are just literally porting their Quest games over to Pico. And at the moment, the Pico library is for a launch date list of games, it's quite big. In fact, probably got some screen capture of me scrolling through some of the games that I might put up now. All the screen capture, by the way, today has been done using the screen capture function on the headset. So it's at like 30 FPS or whatever it is, and it's in whatever resolution it is. That's how that's being done. So you can see how your footage would look if you were to use the record button on the controller. And the screenshots that I show you as well. So, yes, basically you're going to get a Quest experience, but with a nicer screen, nicer lenses, and a more balanced headset. And as far as the game library goes, again, the Chinese market is huge, and prior to this, you can't buy Quests just, you know, retail in that part of the world. And I think I did look up the population of China. I'm sure it was something like 14 billion people, which is more than the UK, the US, and Europe all put together. It's a lot of people. So now that this VR headset is available both over there and here in Europe and UK, and hopefully the US at some point, game developers are really going to be in a rush to get their games that already exist and future upcoming games on the Pico platform, because there is literally billions of potential people, my cat's shouting at me, to buy their games, their titles, their software. So I wouldn't be concerned about the size of the game library. Yes, Ori? What are you shouting about? I don't know whether you'll have heard her, but she's shouting for some reason. I think Katie's gone out the front door and she wants to go out as well. Anyway, yeah, so the game library is going to explode, because if you're a developer producing software titles for the XR2 platform, i.e. quests, and this huge market all of a sudden opens up, you're going to want to get your titles over there too. It'll be interesting whether the Chinese kind of filter what titles can and can't be available on the Pico marketplace. It might be that they only restrict things, because obviously they're very restrictive about content, you know, Google, YouTube, things like that, all a big no-no over there. Hopefully, if they do put restrictions in place, which I'm sure they're going to, it will only be for Chinese headsets rather than the ones that are being sold in Europe as well. You know, hopefully they don't just put a blanket filter over the Pico store, for example. But, you know, we'll see as time goes on with that. In fact, I'm sure there's already a YouTube app. Yes, there is. So, no, that's fine then. It's not going to affect us over here. But yeah, I think the software and games library is going to explode purely because of the sheer volume of new customers that are going to be available over that side of the world. So, I wouldn't worry about that. Of course, there are no Meta or Oculus exclusives available. So things like Beat Saber, for example, if you wanted to buy this for standalone use and you wanted Beat Saber, you can't have it, at least until someone figures out how to sideload it on and circumvent obviously having to get it from Pico or Meta, because it is only an Android headset, and they've actually made it really easy to put APKs on and load them on. So I'm sure it's only a matter of time before you will find online guides whereby you can load Meta exclusives onto your Pico headset. I mean, it's already being circumvented when you use this for PC VR, which we'll talk about now, in fact. You've got your choice of USB or Wi-Fi. The USB connection right now is terrible. The Pico streaming assistant is awful. You're limited to a very low resolution. Now, it shows 2160 by 2160, and a lot of you are going to go, oh, but that is the resolution of the panels, Carl. It is the physical resolution of the panels, but VR games are not rendered at the physical resolution of the panels. You have to render the image larger to accommodate barrel correction. Now, I've got videos explaining all of this, but we'll keep it simple. Basically, you have to render it about 40% higher than the resolution of the panel if you want that image to be sharp and crisp and close to native resolution of the panel once rendered and displayed in your headset. It doesn't work how a normal monitor or TV would work. You have to render it bigger. There's always a lot of confusion over this. People going, oh yeah, well, I'm super sampling at 3168 by 3168. You're not super sampling. Once that is applied for the barrel distortion and corrects that rotation and scaling, what you actually then get presented with is near to native resolution on your displays, and you know, that's what you should have. So when this USB Pico streaming assistant does it 2160 by 2160, and then the correction is applied, you've got a much lower resolution image, and it looks terrible. Not only does it look terrible, I had horribly distorted audio when I used PCVR using the streaming app, both wired and wireless. So just don't do it, at least not for now anyway. If you want to stream your PC VR games, do it using virtual desktop, which is what I've done, and that gives you a much better quality experience. There's no issues with audio. You can choose, you know, a high resolution, so that as much as your graphics card will allow, really, because this is really where we're limited again. You want to run 90 hertz. So virtual desktop settings, ultra settings in virtual desktop renders at 3168 by 3168, and that will give you as close to native resolution as possible in the displays. That, of course, is extremely difficult to render, and there's two lenses each at that resolution. So that's like running, I mean, that's more than running two 4K displays, pixel count wise, at 90 hertz. So, you know, you can imagine your average graphics card is not going to be able to do that. In fact, I'll put up on the screen now the different resolutions that the settings in virtual desktop actually render at. because they're different to the Quest 2. If you've got a Quest 2 and then you get a Pico and you go into virtual desktop and you're used to running on high, so you run the Pico on high, the resolutions are completely different. They're much higher, even though they're still labeled potato, low, medium, high and ultra. So they're on the screen now, and as you can see, if you actually wanted to compare Quest 2 to Pico, the closest, let's say you ran on high on the Quest, that's 2496 by 2592. The closest one to that on the Pico is probably medium at 2304 by 2304. If you ran ultra because you had like a 3090 Ti on your Quest at 2688 by 2784, that is still lower resolution than what high is for the Pico 4. So you'll need to bear this in mind if you have got a Quest 2 and you're thinking, do I kind of upgrade or side grade to the Pico because you want a headset that's better balanced, a bit lighter, and that has much crisper displays. And that's, this is now going to be my daily driver rather than my Quest 2. So you can upgrade because the visual difference is massively noticeable, as is the sort of balance and the weight. So it's if the money isn't too much of a problem for you, because the thing is you can sell your Quest for 250 quid, so you've only got to put in 120 and you've got one of these. That was my thinking because I bought this in my own money. It wasn't sent over for free or anything. I'm like, it's only 120 quid. Why not? So it's definitely an upgrade. But yeah, so should you be doing that and you use it for PC VR over virtual desktop, which is at the moment the best way to do it, just bear in mind these resolutions that are on the screen now, they are not the same. Everything is a little bit higher on the Pico than it is on the Quest for the same preset name, i.e. potato, low, medium, high and ultra. Now, the other issue with virtual desktop and PC VR streaming is it just isn't as smooth as I get with my Quest. And I've got a speculative idea as to why that might be, which I will show you in a second, but it just will not hold the same solid frame rates. So let's say they're both set to 90 Hertz, the resolutions are set as close as I can to put them similar. And we're not even talking on like high or ultra. If I put it down to lower potato, we still don't get a solid frame rate. There's still stutters and frame drops. So I'm not being limited by the performance of my graphics card or PC. What I think I'm being limited by is the Wi-Fi connection. In the Quest 2, once connected over virtual desktop, it sits there at 1200 megabits per second and it does not fluctuate. It is literally rock solid, using all the available bandwidth over my dedicated router for the Wi-Fi connection. And I get a rock solid, smooth experience in my Quest 2. With the Pico, and I'll put screenshots up now, if you look, this is the performance sort of overlay from virtual desktop. Look at the Wi-Fi connection speed. It varies 800, 900, 600. I've seen it as low as 240, and it's constantly changing. Now, I don't know if this is a power saving feature. So like it varies the connection speed based on the amount of data being sent. And so it's constantly changing it up and down. But only every now and then does it actually hit 1200. And then it comes back down again. And I think this is what's causing the unstable frame rate and the slightly rough experience, because that's the only difference I can see. Obviously I'm using the same PC, the same games, the same software, virtual desktop. And with virtual desktop, you can literally switch from Quest to Pico in only like 20 seconds. So you can go back and forward if you really want to, which I did. The only difference I can see is this Wi-Fi connection speed varying. And I can't find a way in the Pico options to adjust anything to do with the Wi-Fi or any power saving options or anything like that. So Guy Godin, who produces virtual desktop, I don't know if you stumbled across this. I'm guessing you must have done, and perhaps you're looking at it. But I think that's why I'm not getting a smooth experience in the Pico like I am in the Quest. And it is a little bit annoying because I want to use this as my daily driver VR headset, and I'm going to, in spite of the fluctuations in frames, because the visual experience is so much nicer, especially, and the comfort as well, especially once I get a VR cover facial interface to get rid of that light leakage. And I will put it on my head in a minute, just to show you what it looks like on me. So I think that's what's causing that problem, and I think that's what needs addressing. Also, from a PC VR standpoint, there are some things that just don't work. Using virtual desktop, oh, I thought it was going to fall down. Using virtual desktop, you can play Oculus or Meta exclusives from PC. You start them from within virtual desktop, and most of them will fire up and play just fine. But there are some things that don't work. Big screen, for example, because currently big screen isn't available on the Pico marketplace. So I thought, oh, let's try it using virtual desktop PC VR. That just doesn't work. There are massive visual artifacts, particularly of where your virtual big screen is in the environment, and it drags around with it, leaving huge trails behind it. So that doesn't work properly, but kind of half works. And then there are other things that just don't work at all, like Pinball Arcade, for example. I love a game of pinball. Just doesn't load because it says it can't find an Oculus headset. So most Oculus or Meta stuff will work PC VR, but not all, and not all perfectly. So just bear that in mind. Whereas if you had a Quest, obviously they would all work perfectly. There'd be no issues. I'm lucky because I have 2 Quests, and I'm just going to be replacing, because like me and Katie like to do 2-player games together. So I'll just be replacing one of my Quests with this. I'll still have a Quest here, so that if some things don't work, you know, in the Pico, I can just put the Quest on. So that's a bonus. So I think that's pretty much the end of my review of this Pico 4 standalone VR headset. I do like it. It will now be my daily driver headset. It hinges up like this. Look, you can put it on your face, close it down, and then just do it up. I know people moan when I don't put things on in videos, but as you can see, fingers, both fingers in the sides here, no problem whatsoever, just like with the Pimax VR headsets. Again, they're designed for wider, flatter faces. And as I say, this cushion at the back here is just not comfortable either. It's like a slab of concrete. Sitting here right now, I can actually see and read the names of games on the shelves behind me. That's how much of a clear reflection comes in the sides here. You know, I could almost navigate around my room looking backwards and in a reflection, which might be a little confusing, using the reflections through the sides here. But, you know, aside from that, the headset's great. And of course, because I have to crank that up hard, I get a bit of pressure on here. And of course, you know, my nose, where I'm just having to pull it really close to my face, where I don't want to have to. VR cover, please come to the rescue, because I like this headset, and at the moment I've either got to deal with super done up tightness squeezing my head, or just, you know, see the room around me reflecting in the lenses. But yes, that is it. There will be links in the description, if I can. Well, where did I buy this from? System Active, I think. So I'll link to wherever the hell I bought it from. Obviously, it's all unaffiliated, and like I say, I bought this out of my own money, like I do a lot of things. But yes, that's great. Apart from ever so slight essence of cheaper plastics and buttons, and, you know, slight fitment issues, ever so slightly rough around the edge software, slightly unpolished. You know, it's for the money, for $379. I don't think you can complain, really. And if you're one of the lucky ones like my friend Justin, where you don't get the light leakage, he was having a great time using this, no problems whatsoever, you know, and really enjoyed it. And he's got a Quest 2, noticeably improved clarity of visuals, and as I say, ever so slightly less washed out panels as well. So yeah, I'll be following this review up, because how long has this gone on? This is a 50-minute review. Wow. I will be doing separate ones where I'm doing sim racing testing and Microsoft Flight Simulator, because this video would really go on. I can't believe it's even got that long. So if you're still here, thanks very much for watching, and as always, take it easy.